Welcome to our Innovation by Design Hangout series. I'm thanking innovation and IoT leaders to share what is working for them, as well as the tips that have made them successful. Today, our Hangout topic is how to design with new technologies in mind. We know there's lots of emerging technologies that designers need to consider today. AR, IoT, AI, drones. I could go on, but you'll want to hear more from the panelists on that. And on our Hangout today, we have panelists who will explore how designers leverage new technologies when designing great products and services for tomorrow's consumer. So with that, let me go ahead and introduce our panelists. First, we have Carlos Jabbar. He's IoT. Hey, Carlos. He's IoT Strategy and Business Design Director at Schneider Electric. In his role, he's responsible for Internet of Things strategy and for incubation for new digital offers for the group. Previously, Carlos was leading strategy and development for the industry business and subsequently integration of Inventus, whoops, I said that wrong, sorry about that, Inventus on the revenue value creation work stream. He joined Schneider Electric in 2011 with corporate strategy division in Paris. Welcome, Carlos.
Thank you very much. Hi, everyone.
And we have Ben Running. Ben is a design and innovation consultant, and most recently he was director of the Innovation Lab at Jet.com. The Jet.com Innovation Lab focused on the new next generation of e-commerce and delivers research prototypes and provides hands-on access to new technology. And for anyone who doesn't know, Jet.com was acquired by Walmart in September of 2016 for $3.3 billion. So it's marking the largest U.S. e-commerce acquisition to date. Pretty impressive. That had to have been exciting to be there at the time. So welcome, Ben.
Hi, everyone.
And we have Michael English, who's consulting leader at Accenture. He's focused on design and implementation of strategies that drives operating margin improvements across various industries. Over the last 10 years, Michael has advised global organizations across a strategy of corporate strategy, operations, enterprise cost reduction, and organization design services. And Michael also leads Accenture's Canada's innovation agenda for urban transit and rail transportation clients. Welcome, Michael.
Thank you, Gretchen. Nice to meet you, everyone.
As you can see, we have a very, very experienced and accomplished panel. As I mentioned before, I am Gretchen Hoffman. I'm Vice President of Marketing at Altitude. Altitude is owned by Accenture and is a design and innovation firm based in Boston with clients like Under Armour, Nike, Thermo Scientific, to name a few. My role today is as the moderator, so you can continue to hear excellent insights from our panelists. Now let's jump into the questions. To get started, I think what would really help is if each panelist, and Carlos, I'll start with you, if each panelist can share some of the new technologies that you see in current designs, as well as examples of products that really using them. You're on mute, Carlos.
Yeah, so now it's good. So one of so it's true, multiple technologies today we've seen being used. You mentioned IoT, AR, AI. All of these are currently used. It's quite a hype, and in some of that is actually the conversations start from a technology perspective, which is probably the wrong way to start. Instead, we should start from a user, from a customer experience, what we're trying to achieve, and then later employing these technologies, which is just enabling. So it's important to keep perspective of how these technologies impact and bring a real value to customers. In our case, in Schneider Electric, which is a manufacturer of industrial automations and electrical distribution. So we have equipments, for example, transformers that we have in the streets. We have switch gears, switch breakers, and we also have automation systems go to manufacturers and software. Is heavily, typically the technologies that we're looking at is IoT today, is really to enable connectivity, is kind of the starting point of everything, where we connect the machine, we connect the systems, extract data, push commands. But then we start also leveraging technologies that augment the user or the operator for better safety, for better execution from those human resources. So better usage of their skills, their capabilities. So I would name, at least in the industrial space and electrical distribution space, connectivity, so everything related to IoT and AR and AI, as are the typical technologies that we are very common today and we're using quite extensively in our field.
Excellent, excellent. Ben, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with what Carlos is saying about all those technologies. I mean, I think AR is kind of a standout technology for me at the moment, just because we've kind of hit this inflection point in terms of consumer hardware, the capabilities of that hardware, and kind of a maturity of usage of the technology. We're really seeing this shift from, AR viewed as this kind of like purely entertaining technology when it's in consumer hands, things like Snapchat and Pokemon, and really moving into kind of a utility, productivity, and something that's going to serve the consumer well when we start to think about e-commerce. Right? So I think about apps like House, like Wayfarer, like IKEA, that are truly using it to solve problems for the consumer. They're looking at probably tools like user journeys and saying, hey, we see this problem that users are having. How can we? And now we have this technology that's mature. It's available to everyone. We have the new iPhones, obviously. Going forward, this technology is going to be front and center in every consumer electronics device. And I just think that just going forward, it's going to be everywhere. We're going to really start seeing creative uses of it, and we're going to start seeing it as this great tool that's available to designers to really solve problems for consumers.
Yeah, absolutely. Michael.
Yeah, I'd like to add here, I very much echo Ben's opinion on this. I was thinking about the mass availability of the AR technology through devices like the iPhone, of course. And you talked a little bit about the e-com world, Ben. In for some of my clients, and I work a lot in the rail industries and public transit and other industrial accounts. Just a year ago, we were testing devices where people would put these very chunky AR glasses on their heads, and we would ask them to, that's right, and ask them to walk the track and try to assist them with some of the visual inspections duties that they had to do. And of course, those glasses are difficult to install on top of hard hats, or it doesn't always very work well in the rain or different elements that these folks have to work in. So now we're looking at these alternative devices where most of our workers do carry some elements of an iPhone or a smartphone with them. So we're looking at things with how do we assist field workers using the devices they already have and use augmented reality installed on those devices. So I think the use cases have just exploded now.
Yeah, I really like the use cases in industrial uses, service uses, technological uses, the people who are, say, I saw a great demo of visuals working on jet engines and kind of holding a phone up and you're seeing guidance of, what part goes where and exactly, which is part number 3 and which is part number 4 and that kind of stuff. That's to save a lot of time. And with regards to the device, like they used to say with photography, what's the best camera? And of course, the best camera is the one you have with you, right? What's the best AR device? It's the one that's already in your pocket, and everybody's got one now.
Yeah, it's so true. It's like you got to be careful what you're doing because someone will have you on video or in a photo, right?
Right.
So, Carlos, what are some of the technologies that are either not used today or really are mostly hype, yet you believe the technology will be popular in the next 5 years, and why? Like a trick question.
Yeah. Most of the technologies today are hype, and I think they will still around, but much more in the background. IoT being one of them, perhaps because it's one of the oldest out of this pack, but it's still a lot of requests for this type of technologies. Augmented reality is a technology highly used today. I'm not sure if it's the life cycle, it's 5 years, but it's for sure they'll have evolution in the coming years in terms of how can we provide better tools to augment skills that we have today, that we augment the skills that we can empower. So tools for visualization and augment capabilities of people. It for sure will have some evolution in the coming years. It's hard to say the timeline, but it's the shelf life is coming.
Excellent. Ben, how about you?
Yeah, so I'm going to cite two examples, and the first is VR, which I'm kind of talking about the full desktop, full headset VR powered by a PC experience, which is currently sort of relegated to the hard gaming sector, and really kind of a specialized industry. And I don't see really right now the point of kind of production scale VR for e-commerce and for a lot of other industries, unless you're really targeting that kind of hardcore gamer segment. I think once we have kind of lighter weight, standalone, more powerful, higher resolution headsets, things will be different. But VR is just also like an inherently unsocial technology. It's something you use by yourself. It's something you use to transport yourself to another world, which kind of pushes it off into this sort of high-end entertainment and gaming segment for me. And the other is, and I'm going to be the guy who says it, but blockchain, which I'm fascinated by blockchain. I think it's an awesome technology, and it's currently super hyped, obviously, because of Bitcoin, which is, 15,000 something. Like I looked this morning, it took 10 hours to get from 14K to 15K. And it has the potential to just be a sea change, fundamental revolutionary technology, kind of in the way it gets compared to TCP in the 70s, which kind of turned the internet from this isolated internal private fiefdoms into this really shared community that the world could join into. For it to gain that kind of widespread use, it's going to take a while. But I think it has great shorter term uses kind of in individual contained silos inside, probably private corporate environments, anywhere where we have to talk about auditing, chain of custody, authenticity, validating transactions, kind of verifying, accounts, tracking accounting. And I think it's going to prove to be far more reliable and far more efficient for companies as they start to implement.
It's definitely an exciting time. I mean, it's not like there's one or two new technologies, right? And they're all so different, yet they work together. So it's going to be very interesting to see who can, take advantage of them and really show the value add to be able to be differentiated. So Michael, pull you back into the conversation here. Can you share tips to designing, really using these new technologies? And please share a few examples, being a little bit specific.
Sure. Good question, Gretchen. And then I'll elaborate a little bit on one of Carlos's point earlier around putting the customer at the center, right? I think, Carlos, you were saying earlier, how do we design for the user and not just showcase cool technologies? So I think when I look at how do we design and what are tips here for designing using cool technologies, one very nice example I've worked on for the last year or so is for a rail company. Again, different example than my first one, but we had these rail conductors who, while they're called engineers in some countries, while driving or performing their duties on their locomotive, they often asked to inspect things and record things, especially incident reporting. And there's different categories of incidents. And traditionally, and it's still the case around most of our states and provinces in North America, Canada and US, people record them manually through checklists. And then we have back office duties that are responsible for collecting all these checklists and entering them in some sort of a different enterprise asset management type systems or other work order related systems. And of course, people have looked at the options and said, why wouldn't we just have the conductors record this on an iPad instead, having connectivity, and eliminate the entire back office support that's required to maintain all of this. And a lot of companies have tried that to realize that then the number of incidents recorded drops significantly because locomotive engineers are not exactly excited to start typing stuff on an iPad, which, based on their feedback after the fact, was longer to do than writing it manually on a piece of paper. So then we realized, well, wait a second, even though we've had the back office benefit of this new application, engineers are not actually writing them in. So if a signal is broken or signage is vandalized or damaged in any way, they just won't write it because it takes longer. So what we've designed here, as in this example, was the use of a chatbot. So now locomotive engineers could press a button, verbally describe what the incident is using their employee ID or even name, frankly, the location. So I'm at mile 652 on this train line. I see a signal down, request work order. And the chatbot collects and analyzes all those keywords and then fills out the work order directly. And now the level of incidents being reported just skyrocketed. So these are examples of when we want to put the needs of the customer or the business user at the center of our design. I think the intent was originally good, had some benefits in some part of the value chain, if you will, but actually caused issues in another section.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think the examples really help paint a picture of what's even possible, right? And get you thinking of even more things you could be doing down the road. But it's also the data, right, that we're able to collect and what you can learn from it to continue to improve to have the next great product. So, it's definitely an exciting time.
Right? One side benefit here is in addition to start collecting actual incidents, now we're looking at other events or environment conditions that actually impact the customer service. So they might say, oh, this platform is overloaded, or there's no parking space in this parking lot. And now all kinds of other information is being shared that weren't being shared before, which we thought was pretty cool.
Yeah. Carlos, do you want to jump in?
So Verde use case, we have similar as well to those use cases. I like to bring to attention slightly different, which is I like this example. What I like is that it's almost like a first step for any industrial company. So what we have here is an example where we start monitoring critical electrical distribution. So imagine a hospital, a building like a hospital, where we have electricity is quite critical to the operations of the hospital. So if electricity goes down, imagine like several areas of a hospital can have serious impact, including impact for the patients that are being treated at this site. So we really wanna ensure that there's a continuity of electrical service in this building. At the same time, when you look at the structure of a maintenance group of a building that it has a hospital inside, they don't have any electrical distribution specialists, and for their needs, they naturally don't need to. But of course, they need to ensure that all the equipments are reliable and well maintained. So that's why we provide this kind of that's why we provide these equipments, but also we provide we want to leverage our domain of expertise in electrical distribution. So not only we employ IoT technologies to connect this type of this critical electrical distribution equipment, and we provide the maintenance group in those buildings dashboards, which is interesting. Is like it, but as I said, they are not specialists, so they cannot really do much with these dashboards, real-time data, health analysis out of these equipments, because again, they are not specialists. So really, to close the loop is understand the profile of this maintenance, understand how is their role and how they interact with this kind of technology, and the right service to capture the value. And in this case, it's not only a dashboard, but ensure that we employ our domain expertise to draft those facility managers and a clear action plan to proper maintain, operate the equipment. So it's really important to close the loop and not stay on the on providing insights, connectivity, even forecasting of events that an equipment can happen. But also we need to ensure that we have a complete technology that gives a clear actions that the operator needs to do. Because again, this type of, so again, understand the profile of the users, understand the customer journey, and understanding what they are willing to pay for, which is critical questions, helps qualify. The question, one more word on the question of what they are willing to pay for. It's also very useful in this example that we have. Because again, they cannot, it's typically those users are facility managers. So it's very difficult for them to describe for a CFO why do they need a 24/7 monitoring system for a critical electrical distribution. They cannot justify this additional cost, very simply. Because in the end of the day, the maintenance role is to ensure continuity of services of critical equipment in the building. So that's their job. Why did they need those additional services? Since that's their job. From this question, we learned from the facility managers that if we provide a comprehensive risk management analysis, they are easily able to justify to a CFO that. So what if an electrical distribution equipment fails, or it's about to fail, which is the really information, or what is the level of likelihoods that an event will happen? What is the financial consequence to the building? What is the financial consequence to the rest of the assets that are connected to or dependent to those electrical distribution equipment? So again, ask not only the customer journey, but understanding what is their willingness and reason for them to pay for a specific solution, address their sustainability of a clear offer, and help the whole business cycle to be complete for helpful solution.
Yeah, it's amazing how much you learn when you go out and actually talk with the customer and really are able to go in their environment and observe them, right? And how much that can add value to the design that you come back with, because it really can be used. So, Ben, what would you like to add?
Yeah, so I'm gonna third the customer centric, talking to the customer lens here, and I'm gonna say you definitely, with regards to designing for new technology, you definitely have to understand the technology and the landscape where the tech is going, but more importantly, understand what part of that technology your customers use, what they own, what they're interested in owning, and what they're interested in using. Because you can certainly nudge customers towards a new technology or kind of a new way of working. And it of course is harder when you're talking about having to buy new hardware, waiting for new hardware to become available. But a tempting offering that really satisfies a need or solves a problem is what's going to get people to use the new technology. And honestly, like, the design methodologies for doing this are basically the same as designing for anything else, in my opinion. You're going to identify a problem and you're going to use the tools available to you to solve that problem in a way that serves the customer, right? So again, this is back to the user journey. We're finding those questions, those problem statements, the opportunities, kind of the lows in your journey and the highs in your journey. It's about, alleviating the lows and capitalizing off of the highs. So those high points could be an opportunity for, to sort of nudge someone to try a new technology. And I see companies like Amazon is doing great things. They have this Google Tango app that allows people to preview TVs in different sizes on their walls, which sounds trivial, but if you look at that customer journey as people are shopping for the TV, odds are that there's a really low point when people are like, well, do I get the 40 or do I get the 48? And previously it would be like, well, how far do you sit from the wall? And how big is your wall space? And I'm out there with a tape measure trying to be like, well, it's 8 feet from the wall and I have 16 feet. I guess I get the 40. And it's like, no, I'm going to hold up my phone and I'm going to solve this really easily using this new technology. So that is going to nudge me towards using this new tech, towards understanding it, towards figuring it out, because I really am going to get the benefit from it. And my team at Jet had sort of a similar problem that we were trying to attack in a VR prototype, which was that it's really hard to shop for home accessories and home items when you kind of don't really know what you want, but you just have this problem statement of, I want to spruce up my living room a little bit. And you're looking at disparate product pages with small photos of items. It's really hard to tell what looks good together. What is the context, these things are going to sit in? What's the scale of one thing to another? So we devised this, kind of small scale, inexpensive prototype that basically allowed people in VR to explore a essentially shoppable Pinterest photo, almost a beautifully decorated apartment full of great stuff, arranged by a decorator, shown in context, and it was aspirational, yet these things are all attainable, stuff that you can buy, but it just kind of gives you context for buying this stuff. So we think we were using this technology in a way that was tempting for users and in a way that solves a problem that they had.
Yeah, those are good examples, and I think great tips and highlights, like you're saying with the highs. What if you flipped it, Ben, and talked about trouble spots, right, that you see designers might be facing with these technologies, and any lessons that maybe you've learned along the way?
Sure. I think first and foremost is something that Michael mentioned previously is don't use the tech for the sake of using the tech, right? That's not going to get you anywhere. And don't use it for the sake of kind of like putting your company out front. I see plenty of like examples of gratuitous, VR and AR especially, where I'm like, why do you have this app? Why do you need this? Sometimes it's just to have a cool thing out there, which is fine. It's fine to develop the technology as an example of leadership or as an example of progressive thinking, or it's cool when you go to South by Southwest or something and some company has a really cool VR thing that doesn't really provide any value other than to get you talking about the company. I think that is, that can be valuable to have these showpieces, but you can't assume that just because it's there, your users are going to adopt the technology and they're going to really like find value in the technology. So, without going through the proper research channels that we've been talking about, which is talking to users, doing frequent user testing, prototyping, evaluating your market, kind of iterating towards the technology, I think you're going to be left a little lacking. And I see these companies who are kind of like building out subpar, VR experiences and then talking about it like they're going to Mars. But like, I think that the better approach for this is, baby steps, basically. And I think Shopify is kind of an interesting example that I've seen recently, where they add a desktop VR view of a product as kind of yet another image. So you can see, you have 5 images of a product, your top view, your side view, your back view, and then, here's a VR view. And if you have the web VR technology available on your computer and you have a headset, you can also just jump right into that. It feels seamless. It feels, kind of like a bonus add-on for the people who want to use it. And I think that's kind of a very valuable add-on for people. I can go back to Apple as an example. They're not always first to do things, right? But they often like do it well after kind of, there's been demand established for this stuff, and it helps avoid some of these pitfalls.
Yeah. Carlos, what about you?
So for us, this some of these technologies. So again, I fully agree with the points. It's not only about using technology for the sake of technology. Once we are in an engineering company working with engineers, where our customers are engineers, so the whole technology, it's a bit more the curve is a bit different. We have the change and the steps are probably more babe steps, if I can paraphrase. So we have to be careful there. But still, we have to. My role in the organization and what we're trying to do is bring the design thinking, value and methodology to this environment, which is typically is technology driven, and prove to be successful. Once they see when we insist a lot on the customer experience, on the customer value, on monetization, the discussions on technology start being more balanced in our case. Because in the end of the day, what we're looking is not necessarily to employ technologies, but ensure that we're building a new offer, that there is a new and a clear business model, there is a clear monetization. So once we start bringing these elements and feedback from the customers, then the balance in terms of technology employment start being a bit more balanced. Again, in my example of the electrical distribution monitoring by experts, it's an excellent story that we have internally in the group. Where it took several years, so this offer was actually, or this service was co-developed with 3-4 customers, food and beverage factory in Switzerland, cement company, a cement plant in France, and also a hospital in the US. So it's very diverse, and it was co-development again with R&D groups of those organizations, and they were all about looking at how to establish connectivity and build these dashboards on this electrical distribution equipment. But and they were lost for several months on that. So up to a point where we come in and say, okay, let's park a little bit on this technology discussion, because in the end of the day, we're gonna do whatever it's needed. And if we don't have the technology, which is Schneider Electric obviously is not a cloud infrastructure player. And the intent is not really to develop everything. We're going to partner. So we partner with multiple companies, including Microsoft, including Google in several cases, Amazon. So we have multiple partners. So we're going to find the technology to do it. But let's park the technology discussion for a minute. Let's understand what is the value for our users, primary users, which is the facility managers, what we need to provide in terms of experience to those factories or for those sites where electricity is critical. So for cement companies, it's critical because it's one of the main cost drivers. For the same for a food and beverage company, and for a hospital is because electricity is mission critical or life critical also. So we understand the criticality of electrical distribution and what is the role of the facility manager or the site manager there. Then when you put this in perspective and you bring user plus how to monetize, how to make a business for our company, for our customers, for the different players where we have in this type of business, then the discussion on technology start being minimized. And in the end of the day, we bring in solution architects where they're going to define and prescribe the right technologies. We're going to bring partners, specialists that will. Okay, so the business discussion, the monetization discussion goes good.
Yeah, excellent. For the folks listening in, please remember that you can submit your questions in the Ask Questions area, and also love to have you engage in Twitter if you're so inclined. So with that, Michael, do you have any comments you'd like to add? Or have we covered most of the trouble spots?
Well, there's a couple of comments that Carlos made that resonated very well with me when you said, Carlos, let's put the tech aside and let's understand the value from our users. And I find when I work with, or maybe sometimes in partnership with startup companies, they do that naturally, right? A lot of small companies are a little bit more natural, more nimble at saying, what is the problem I'm trying to solve? And let's just go at it. And then when I work with large organizations, they get caught up with, what does innovation mean? And there's so many new technologies thrown at us every day. It's just tough to catch up. So the one of the trouble spots for me is how do we manage a culture of innovation, and how do we break the barriers and the beliefs that our large workforce type organizations have. And I use an exercise that I absolutely love, and we've compiled a library of, I think it's now 2,000 different orthodoxies. And orthodoxies are deeply shared beliefs that are often impediments to innovation. And we cycled through those things, and we talk about things like, so at one point in time, people thought the smartphone needed a keyboard, and then we show a picture of the iPhone, of course. Or suitcases need to be carried. I know when I started to travel, my first suitcase was a leather suitcase that I had to carry in my hands, right? Now you look at the airports, 90% of suitcases are wheeled around behind people. Cars need drivers. Another orthodoxies that most of us had a couple of years ago, I don't think it's going to be reality in perhaps a number of years ahead of us. I'm not sure exactly how many. At one point, Kodak thought that the digital camera wouldn't take off. So we go through these orthodoxies with the spirit of challenging our belief system, especially in large organizations, so that we can absorb and start to view what Carlos was talking about. How do we view the value of an innovative solution or something out there without applying our set of beliefs that are often impediments to moving ahead? So that's just one point, a trouble spot that I wanted to add here.
Yeah, no, that's excellent. Excellent.
Yeah, if I could jump in there on the point of innovation, I find you can ask 100 different people at 100 different companies what innovation means, and you're going to get 100 answers. Some people are just like, well, it's our M&A team, and some people are like, it's drones, and kind of everything in between. And for me, it's about this. It's about design thinking, really. It's about a process, and it kind of like occurred to me somewhere along the way that design process and innovation process are in large part the same thing. And going back to what Michael was saying about the orthodoxies, a lot of the time it's about challenging assumptions you're making, right? Assumptions as to like why something would work or why something wouldn't work, and sort of structuring these cheap, fast, small-scale prototypes and tests around exactly those things. So we're saying, hey, we have this idea about self-driving cars, or we have an idea about delivering a package by a drone or something like that. And kind of what are these most basic things? Do people want to see cars without drivers in them? That's an easy thing to test without building a self-driving car.
Yeah, no, it's a great point. So Ben, you mentioned Shopify before. Mm-hmm. Are there other companies you believe that are doing a great job of encouraging the use of new technologies in design, and what approaches are they using to encourage this?
Yeah, so if we want to kind of stick with the AR/VR angle, which I've been talking a lot about, I think Wayfarer is a really great company. They've been advocating this technology for quite a while. Since sort of early days of the technology, they've been developing a lot of prototypes as well as kind of small-scale production apps without really forcing them on users, but making them available to users. Some are kind of more fun. Some are like really focused on productivity. But they recognize the value, I think, pretty early on. And I think they did a really good job at realizing that specifically in furniture and home decoration, a couple things are really important. And one is scale, right? It's really hard to kind of judge the scale of something, how it's going to fit in your house. And this is a problem when it comes to shopping online, especially for larger items, right? If you're buying say a digital camera online, you know what you're getting. You can just go by the specs. You can say it's megapixels, it's brand, it's this lens. Great, I want it. It's going to be fine. But if you're buying a couch or you're buying a table or something like that, there's a bigger question, and you can kind of have this trust gap that, man, I don't know is it really going to look like that? How is it going to look in my house? How is it going to look with my things? And this technology really lets us address those problems. And I think a cool thing they did in kind of realizing early on that they wanted to invest in this technology is they started doing 3D models and creating 3D representations of all of their products, which is a huge undertaking. And it's something that a lot of companies, I think, without realizing the sort of level of effort involved in this, run up against, they kind of hit a wall when they're like, we want to do VR, we want to do AR, and then we're like, wait, we have 6,000 products, which means we need 3D images of all of them or a lot of them. So they invested heavily in this early on. They really built a great process for doing it. And I think other companies can kind of learn a lot from that. And one other that I really like, which is Lowe's. And Lowe's thing that they call, I think, the Hollow Room, is an in-store VR experience that basically seeks to educate users before they start a home project, right? So you go in there and you're like, I want to recaulk my bathroom or kind of whatever the project is, lay some tile down. You're about to go in there and hope that you have the skills, hope that you've read the article right or watched the YouTube videos, and you go in and you're probably kind of worried about spending all this money in something and hoping you're not going to screw it up. What this lets you do is kind of go into an area in the store, put on the headset, and actually walk the process and experience the process. And they cite a dramatic improvement rate versus watching YouTube videos, something like a 35% improvement rate in success of the project, which I think is a really cool way to use this technology, and also to bring it into the store. When you start to talk about these blended experiences, these omni-channel experiences, what is the future of retail and what do the future of brick and mortar stores look like, these things are going to go a long way.
Yeah, it's interesting because you raise a good point that you really do have to plan ahead. It's not like you can all of a sudden say, great, I want to do AR, right? I mean,
hit the switch, we're in AR.
Yeah, hit the switch, right? But it's also cool because you guys are from very different industries, so very different perspectives. I hope the listeners are clearly looking at how they can translate, across the different industries too. I mean, very, very good ideas. So anything here? What I was thinking, Carlos, is I might pull you back in the conversation and ask you a little more on how does a company designing with the new technologies balance keeping the user at the forefront? Because you talked about how important it is that we're really out there talking with the user, as has everybody. But like if they don't know the technology exists, right? How do you get that feedback?
Yeah, that's excellent. That's actually an excellent point. So again, in my world, the users actually know the technology, and the requests come. How can I use this technology? Or let's do a project employing X or Y technologies. That's typically either coming from our customers, either coming from our businesses that they want to develop more offers, more initiatives. And sometimes, so once if they don't know, it's actually in our case, it's probably best because we don't get distracted with a technology in the first place, instead of really keep everyone focused on what is the business, what we're trying to do, right in the beginning of the process, which is really the starting point, for us. So not knowing the technology, I don't think it's a problem. For us, is probably a good point. In some cases, a bit more easier to go through this kind of journey with our customers. Again, in several cases, and I keep on my example on critical electrical distributions. A project started with a couple of years ago, actually, with the idea of employing a certain IoT technologies. Now I have another project. How can we employ machine learning for in our data centers type of offer, which is there are multiple projects from already in place there. So they heard typically. People in our space, they hear about certain technologies, hear about the use case, they want to apply it, but they want to apply more kind of in an attitude of like a Me Too attitude, but again, not really focus on what problems we're trying to solve, and what is the business behind. So it's really, again, it's important to focus on the business. On the closing this loop and capturing the full value.
Yeah, absolutely. Michael, how about you?
Yeah, so I don't think that's a concern for me, that the fact that our folks may not know all the technologies out there. It's just amazing what we have access to, what can be built, right, that we don't even know exists today. So That's usually not an obstacle that I'm faced with. But an example I was just thinking about, a couple months ago, I was with an industrial company in the field, trying to understand how we could use 3D printers to print consumables. There's different parts that are consumed over time, and how we could use 3D printers. And we're both thinking, nah, I don't think the 3D printing business is at that level just yet. I don't think it's sophisticated enough. And him and I are debating about this, but both convincing ourselves that it couldn't be done. And then we came out and to an announcement that says someone actually is building a house using 3D printers today. So surely if someone's building a house, I think we can build a few bolts and a couple of accessories. And I think it's this level of openness now that we were guilty of putting our beliefs again in a mix of all of this. But I think the art's still possible now. There's so much things we can do. So I don't think it's a big obstacle.
Yeah, we do have to think anything's possible, open our minds, right? I mean, I think that's a really good reminder.
Exactly.
Ben, do we want to pull you back in? Any comments?
Yeah. I mean, I agree with Michael and Carlos. Great sentiments. I kind of go back to the notion of, using design and technology to solve problems for the business, but do it by solving problems for the consumer. And with regards to the kind of like Me Too notion that Carlos was bringing up, simply like copying usage by companies often does not work, because those companies are probably solving problems for their own customers and problems that they're seeing kind of in their own environments. So, implementing someone else's solution, no matter how cool it looks, may not actually serve your audience.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Carlos, when we were first talking about this Hangout, I think you and Michael had both talked about how important it is to really figure out how do you monetize your investments in the new technologies and drive sustainability. Can you talk, Carlos, a little bit about that for the folks listening in?
Yeah, so for sure, that's for me I'm really passionate about this the monetization element in my job, because that's what in the end of the day what it really drives, that what really brings a value added in our space, in our scope here. So the idea of a monetization for me is in the end of the day what brings sustainability to an offer. So if when you are designing or mapping the customer journey, you identify what the customer likes, preferences, what resonates with their profile. So this is all good, but somehow you have to, in the end of the day, get to a point where what is essential for them, what is essential, and what is extremely relevant to a point that they would invest money, monetize, and how these transactions flow of investments should properly happen. And I think this is also applicable to consumer goods, to consumers like me, you. We know that also consumers tend to, the purchase profile is a little bit more is different from an enterprise level. There's a lot of there's more impulsive elements there, but it's still quite important. Think about a quick exercise. Think about your how many apps do you have in your mobile phone? Then think about what are those apps that you really, really like and use on a constant basis. And then the third exercise is think about of those who will actually pay for it, and you pay a reasonable amount of money. Even those that you really, really like and you love and use constantly. All this is different. So this gap for me is that how can you keep and sustain a business over time, where we have partners, we have full development, you have operations behind, and you are committed to evolve. This is where we and here I bring another element, which is scalability of the offers, because again in our space, where we have engineers and people who not only their job is to develop new technologies, but also they love to experiment. So how can we move from a proof of concept, an experimentation of a technology that actually solve a problem, but solve a problem in a very specific context, to evolve this solution where we can scale to multi context, to a variety of contexts, where we can scale to a variety of cultures, so that we can scale to a variety of industries, and we actually make a scalable business out there. So these questions of scalability from a proof of concept that's actually prove the concept and prove the solution of a problem or do address a need, to something that really solve a broader a variety of problems and needs at scale. That's really where the value is. And again, this is a major challenge that we face, that industrials like our company face. But I also see plenty of examples as well even in the consumer.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent. I know on the same topic, Michael, you and I had talked a little bit about it. How do you see folks monetizing the investment?
Yeah, and I'll use a couple of examples in my discussion here too. If I think about monetization, a big factor is adoption, right? We were talking about the app a second ago, but if we need adoption, and if we can create something really cool, we can have a monetization plan. But if there's no adoption, it just we can't recoup what we've invested. So a big factor for me, if I'm being very tactical here to be useful to our listeners too, is how do we understand the customer? And one mistake that I've been guilty of in my past as well, and I find a lot of people try to do, is sometimes bucket the customers into personas. And you know, we've got, in the case, as an example, a public transit company, we may have the everyday rider, the student, the occasional rider, or the vacation, the tourist, right? And we try to bucket people. And then when we try to do that, we understand people, but not their mindsets and their intent and their wants. And people change over time, right? So I could be an everyday rider, but now this Friday, I'm taking my 3 kids to a baseball game. Now my needs as a traveler are completely different, right? And so when I think about monetizing our technologies, it's a lot more than finding something that works for people that we've categorized as personas, but it's about how do we personalize this, and how do we understand who they are, but their mindset and their context for this specific use. And I think we fail a lot at doing that. So I spent an enormous amount of my time thinking about, how people behave at different point in times, and how do we get to predict that ahead of time to make sure that whatever we build ties to this or considers this. And then we introduced a whole element of personalization in every transactions we do. And so when I think about monetization and I think about getting adoption, I really think about, of course, we all say understand your customer, but I think it's a lot more than that. It's about the mindset. It's about the context of the customer transaction.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, for the folks listening in, this has been an excellent dialogue. I hope you're finding it very valuable. I had promised at the beginning we would take your questions. I do not see a lot in. I'm assuming that's because we're answering a lot of them. So what I'm going to do now is we have about 4 more minutes left. I'm going to have each of the panelists go around the horn and really summarize what your top 2 takeaways. What are the couple things you want to make sure the folks listening in remember as relates to our topic on new technologies and designing for new technologies? And then I see there's actually just a couple questions in, so we'll look at those and then we'll do a wrap. So Carlos, let's go ahead and start with you in terms of what do you want to make sure people remember out of all the great content you've provided here?
Excellent. Thank you very much. So here's, for me, what is important, and my takeaways here is yes, focus on the customer, And be careful. I think it's a very important point here from Michael. So be careful on how to categorize and classify the customers, because the same individual can be one persona and in one situation and another persona in another situation. So be careful on the way we employ this simplification of a reality for convention. But ensure that's always again start from the customer, but not from the technologies. And we know that one of the challenges that we have is how to marry these upcoming technologies that eventually can solve a customer problem. So how to do this good marriage between technologies, available technologies and upcoming technologies with a customer problems, customer needs. And the second element that for me is important for the folks here is again on monetization. How we ensure that we go down to a very unique set of value that the customer values so much, wants so much, they are willing to pay for it. And beyond that, they are also able to actually get, if it's an industrial context, get a budget and sell internally to their organization to make this transaction happen. So these are the elements that I have in mind. Thank you.
Great points. Ben, how about you?
Yeah, thanks. So I'll double down, triple down again on listening to your customers, and back to the point of yes, they are supposed to be kind of like abstracted aggregates of users, but it's amazing how many times I've seen personas constructed just like out of thin air, like without actually talking to anyone. So, pay attention to your users, do your user research, just talk to people, listen to your customer service. And again, I'm coming at this kind of from the perspective of retail, but, talk to your customer service or the first line in your defense, sort of, do your surveys, look at feedback and reviews in social media and factor these things. They are the voice of the customer. They're often kind of the front line in determining or in sort of in understanding what people are thinking and figuring out how to sort of make that actionable from your perspective. And then secondly is just like the notion that some projects are kind of like, not important enough, or we need to be thinking bigger in some ways. Dabble, I guess. Let ideas bubble up. Start small. A number of companies that I've worked with kind of do these exercises where they'll just take input from everybody in the company and then kind of use exercises and other methods to sort of bubble up the ideas that we think are worth pursuing. I've talked to very big companies that say, we don't even start to tackle an idea unless it's going to be $1 billion idea. It's just not even an option, which I think is, I understand in a giant company that some things are just like, kind of may not be worth pursuing because you think they're too small, but a lot of these ideas can have potential. So figure out sort of like ways to do fast, cheap, quick experiments to vet ideas, invest in innovation and invest kind of in the frameworks and leadership that can work to bubble up the small ideas and find value.
Great. Michael, anything you want to add?
Last 2 points for me. We know that technology is thrown at us at an incredible pace, so we've got to work our culture of innovation and challenge our belief systems, be open to finding applications and understand the business needs, which we've talked about. And the last one was a little bit new point for me, but one I wanted to share is we've got to think about the end-to-end value chains. So we often solve a problem in one area and maybe cause grief for another problem in another. So we've got to be conscious about the entire value chains of our problems.
Yeah, excellent. So this is a great dialogue. For the folks listening in, we do have free resources, and we have all the recorded hangouts on our website, which is altitudeinc.com. Absolutely encourage you to join there. It looks like most of the questions have been answered. We have one question that I would like to ask. If I could ask our panelists for one moment to address that, and then we'll go ahead and do a wrap. So I do very much want to thank Ben and Carlos and Michael for taking time on the panel, for your excellent insights, very, very valuable. It's exciting to hear what's happening with new technologies and how we're going to incorporate them in design. So let me jump to the first question here, which is, now let's talk about technologies that were discounted in the past and became relevant. Are there any criteria for spotting those instances, or is it just luck? So anything we should be really looking for?
I mean, sometimes we just have to be ready for a technology. You know, there are a lot of cases of tech sort of like coming too early before people are ready for it. And, you know, a lot of things like kind of like come around and go around. In terms of criteria for spotting that stuff, that's a hard one.
Yeah. I mean, it is. It's like you have to have a psychic ball, you know. So anyway, hey, I'm going to wrap. I know we're at the top of the hour. Again, thank you very much, panelists. Thank you, everyone, for listening in. Appreciate it. And have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye-bye.
Great. Thank you. Take care.